No, we're not. We don't. I'm not a label printing company. I mean, I think
Right.
about there are some people out there. I mean, Michael Nardi and others who have great systems that actually really do label printing and they can do dual pricing in that way. And I applaud them for that. I think that's fantastic. And they've worked closely with Visa on those efforts. But the truth of the matter is, there's just a lot of merchants out there that are not going to reprint all their labels. They're not going to reprint their menus. And at the end of the day, the courts have seemed to side whenever it does come up in court. It does seem to be like, hey, these are free speech rights. So if Visa's okay with me printing two different prices on a label, why are they not okay with me having two different prices at the register? It's just something that is intuitively, it's not intuitive. It's kind of confusing, I guess is my point.
We hope you enjoy this episode of PEP, the Payments Experts Podcast. Today we have with us, we're very excited to have James Shepard from CC Sales Pro. We also have James Huber, managing partner at Global Legal Law Firm, in studio. Gentlemen, welcome.
Yeah, great to be here.
All right. Well, James, the tables have turned. You're on my podcast now.
I know. I don't know what to think. I've interviewed you so many times now. I'm like, wait a second. All right, I gotta be the one interviewed. So here we go.
Well, it's interesting because your podcast is great. I listen to it all the time, and we'll put a plug for where people should be listening to that. Not that they necessarily need it because you have so many people listening to it, but I remember the first time getting on it, I was like very nervous. Like, what do I do with my hands? And you've got Patty there who's
right.
fabulous, grilling me too. I remember one time we turned the podcast off because we were like, you're just confusing us, James. We're going to have to start this over.
Yeah, you're right. That's funny. You know what? You might be the only one that we've ever done that for. I remember that.
Yeah,
that's funny.
That's my claim to fame. I ruined the podcast.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. But the Merchant Sales Podcast. So they can look that one up anywhere they want and any of the platforms they listen to. But appreciate the plug.
Yeah, and I think we deleted that one. But anyways, so look, I'd like to start. You've been in this industry for a while. I'd say you're certainly a force. I think everybody knows your name in the industry, and if they don't, they certainly should. But tell me a little. How'd you get in? How'd you get into this industry?
Yeah, I think like most people, I got in by accident, right? So I moved out. I was in Chicago. I was working with ServiceMaster. And funny story, I started working when I was about 19 years old with the True Green Lawn Care division, bug sprays and fertilizer and all that. And when I was 19, the Do Not Call law came out. So I'm dating myself a little bit here. But their entire business model was built on telemarketing. And all of a sudden, they couldn't call, 60, 70% of the households that they were calling before. And so their whole business model was just like in turmoil. And so I'll never forget the branch manager came to me. At that time, I think maybe I was 20. And he's like, hey, the company wants us to try door-to-door sales for lawn care. It's a horrible idea. I think it's going to be terrible. But if you want to lead that for our branch, you can. I was like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah. I was like, yeah, let's do it. So about 2 years later, we had 30 or 40 salespeople out going door to door. It was fantastic. So that I got very lucky in the timing with all that because the success of that effort allowed me to go to different branches and train people and kind of, be an evangelist for this new model in the company. So that was my background. And then I got married. My wife was from out here in Pennsylvania where I'm at now. And so I loved it out here. Decided, hey, let's make a move. So I moved out looking for a job. Recruiter reached out about payment processing. And I thought, well, until I get a real job, I'll do that, And so here I am 13 years later. I still haven't found a real job. Right. And so I get into it, selling payment processing, had a local ISO. Then I started building some W-2 salespeople, that type of a team locally. Then about a year or so in, I kind of realized, man, there's like nothing out there. There's no good YouTube videos. There's no good online content. Like, this is really hard to learn this very complicated industry. So I thought, well, I guess I'll start a YouTube channel. And it really just took off from there. It turns out everybody like me was searching. And so was able to build that brand. And then from there started CC Sales Pro, the blog, the website. I built 2 different national ISOs. So we had 2 companies that were retail ISOs, basically, that were doing the last one I sold was doing about 200 deals a month. And then I sold that back to TSYS. That would have been about 7 years ago. And then I went into software and consulting and basically now serving more of the ISOs and payment processors out there.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, I mean, we do trainings with new people we bring in. We actually point them to, I think, one of your earlier videos where you're just explaining who the players are, because I'll do one where, we'll put up the whiteboard and we'll say, here's Visa, here's First Data, here's the sponsor bank, the acquiring bank. And then, by the end of it, it's just a garbledy mess with lines all over it.
Right.
And, when I do that in the courtroom for a judge, I've had multiple judges thank me for that. I'll usually do that in the opening statement. It's just like, hey, so everybody knows this is how it works, and it's super complicated. I'm going to explain it really simple in about 8 minutes.
Right.
And they'll say thank you, because I say it to our staff all the time is, hey, you going through this training, you now know more about payments than probably 99.9999% of the world. And everybody is using electronic payments unless you are in a third world country probably at this point.
Right. It's insane. I mean, our industry it's an amazing opportunity because of the complexity, I think, in a lot of ways. Whenever you see a lot of complexity, there's usually an opportunity to simplify.
Right.
That's what we saw Square do. That's what we saw Stripe do. And I think we're continuing to see that, right? But it's that trend of simplification and taking an industry that's unnecessarily complex, right, and simplifying it. And so, it's an amazing industry. I've kind of fallen in love with it. I mean, it's weird looking back and like, wow, I've been doing this for so long. But I just love the industry because I love change. I'm a person that really embraces that. I love innovation. And so this is an industry that always has an open door for change and innovation.
Yeah. And for smart people like yourself, I mean, you coined it right there is, you have to have your head on a swivel in this industry. And, one thing you and I have been talking about for years, and we're talking about quite a bit now, is the cash discounting surcharging change. And what that is, high level is, it's passing on those fees to the consumer. So, this has been done for years. If you go into a hotel and they're saying, 3% service charge or whatever, they're calling it whatever. Right. And Visa hates this.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, so I've come to really call this differential pricing, right? Because there's so many of these different variations now. We've got surcharging and cash discounting and non-cash adjustment and service fee, whatever. At the end of the day, I think Visa hates this sort of as they should, because we have a different price point for their form of payment, their method of payment versus other methods of payment. And so any way you slice it in some way, shape, or form, it's a penalty, right, for their customers to use their network. And I think in the US market, I feel like it's accentuated a bit because, for those that maybe aren't as familiar with our industry, the vast majority of the cost structure centers around interchange, which is what the issuing bank charges that issues these cards. And in the US market, our average interchange is like, somewhere around 2% in the US. Most of the rest of the developed world, it's like 0.5% or less. Yeah. So, because of that, in order for us to be able to have a differential that offsets the cost of accepting a card in this country, well, the differential is pretty high. It's, 3-4% in order to offset and make a profit. So I think Visa, it's not that I fault them for being upset about it. I totally understand that. I don't even fault them for fighting back. But I think the problem is that at this point, I think that, it's a little too far gone. There's too many business owners that are doing it. They love it. Consumer behavior is already adapted to it. So I think that there's good things they could do to regulate this, and I think there's bad things. And in my mind, the things that they've done have been all the bad things. It's like they just haven't done the good things that they should do at this point, is my opinion.
I agree. I mean, we were going back and forth about the fines that ISOs are getting. I think somebody got fined $1 million. Yeah. And we have other ISOs getting small fines all over. But Visa, we did a panel that's, I think, up on another podcast. They're saying, they're like, well, these fees, we don't want regulation. We don't want the people to start complaining about this. And then we're going, well, they're your fees. You set the fees. But then Visa goes, well, it all goes to the issuing bank. And we're going, sure, a lot of it goes to the issuing bank.
Right.
But a percentage of that goes to you, all of it. And there's multiple issuing banks. So good one. Well, you guys could lower your fees, but the bank, you guys you're working together. You're in cohorts with an issuing bank.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I can play devil's advocate for a minute, and even taking Visa side, look at the Credit Card Competition Act, right? That's coming out, which in my opinion is one of the worst pieces of legislation I've ever seen, in terms of being so misguided and a lack of understanding about what they're trying to do. And so I think there definitely is a sense of Washington wants to do something about this. Look at the Biden administration; they're focused on junk fees, which came very close to specifically mentioning these types of fees. So I think there's a lot out there, but again, my issue isn't necessarily with Visa having a problem with it or taking action. I just think they're taking the wrong action. I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish here, because at the end of the day, this is a practice that business owners want to implement. And I think Visa's been they haven't been as transparent about really what they're going to do from a compliance perspective and enforcement perspective. So I can't tell you how many huge companies that you would think would get this right, where they'll say, oh, we're not doing these programs anymore. And then they'll say, well, okay, Visa's not actually doing anything. We'll start doing them again. And oh, wait, we got a fine. We'll stop doing it. And oh, wait, now that it's just too much. It's been crazy. And the result of that is now they've waited so long. Businesses all over the country are doing these programs. They will continue to do these programs. So the question isn't, how do we get rid of them? The question is, what do we do with them now that they're here?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the problem since the get-go it's been unclear. I mean,
Exactly.
We had before our presentation, I think it was last month, we came forward and we worked on, the slides that we were going to present. And then last minute, the Visa guy changed them around. And we're going, well, wait, we went over these and talked about these. Like you're literally changed the rules in a 3-week time. And it was, he backed up on his position, and, I'm not quoting him, but he backed up on his position because for a while they were saying, look, dual pricing is really the only way to do it, or at least that's the gold standard. And his new argument was like, no, just increase all your prices. Just put your prices higher and the consumer won't care, for if Costco suddenly raises the price on their hot dog, nobody cares. I mean, from my understanding on the internet, that would cause a riot. So,
and my biggest issue with those programs, and I have good friends that do that. I mean, I think about a lot of companies that have, what I would consider a legitimate cash discount program, where they go in and help the merchant, do a price increase and then do a discount at the register, which, Visa is fine with, because the Durbin Amendment makes them be fine with it. But the issue there is it's just inconvenient because it's not practical. Like if I have a bunch of prices at $19.95, am I really going to change the sticker price to $20.40? It just doesn't make sense. So, if I'm a restaurant, I got to reprint my menu. These are things that are just impractical for most businesses. And it's also impractical for the ISOs and agents to go out there and do this. And I think my biggest issue, if I had to put my finger on the number one issue I have with all this, is why on earth, like, how do we look at the ISO and we're like, okay, ISO, you're responsible for how the merchant prices things. No, we're not. We don't. I'm not a label printing company. I mean, I think about there are some people out there. I mean, Michael Nardi and others who have great systems that actually really do label printing, and they can do dual pricing in that way. And I applaud them for that. I think that's fantastic. And they've worked closely with Visa on those efforts. But the truth of the matter is, there's just a lot of merchants out there that are not going to reprint all their labels. They're not going to reprint their menus. And at the end of the day, the courts have seemed to side whenever it does come up in court. It does seem to be like, hey, these are free speech rights. So if Visa's okay with me printing 2 different prices on a label, why are they not okay with me having 2 different prices at the register? It's just something that is intuitively, it's not intuitive. It's kind of confusing, I guess, is my point.
Yeah. I mean, the issue, so that this has been litigated at the state level when the states have their surcharge caps, and everybody is won on saying this is a free speech issue. I have the right to, advertise my prices. Right. The problem with Visa is they're not a government entity. So those causes of action don't work as well. But Visa is probably more powerful than any state because it runs the whole world. I think we found in one state they spent $7 million in lobbying.
Right.
In one single state. So who knows? And nowadays, you can't track where lobbying efforts go, but I would guess Visa's lobbying is in the billions.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, I mean, It's interesting to me. I go back and forth on it, honestly. I mean, I don't have a big issue with Visa. I think that in this particular area, I think it's more of an ineptitude of they're not connected to the people that are dealing with this. I think Visa's gotten to a level where all they deal with is issuing banks and sponsor banks and big acquirers. And it's like, they don't understand the reality, I feel like, of what's actually happening with small ISOs and agents and small merchants. And these programs are they're here to stay. Whether Visa likes it or not, they're here to stay. And, the question is, how do we deal with it? And in my mind, I just feel like Visa, in their own interest, they have enough PR issues without let's anger hundreds of thousands of small business owners. I just don't see the point at this time. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of everybody's resources in the industry. Why can't we all get together, figure out what's reasonable, and just run with that? And that's what I would love to see.
I mean, I would too. And, this industry started thriving. I mean, going ballistic once this caught on. I mean, cash discounting has been around since, 2009 or so. And when it first came out, it didn't pick up. Nobody liked it because you're going in to buy your coffee and it was, like a 25-cent fee on debit or whatever. Right. And there was complaints, and we were advertising people, it's not worth it a lot of times for small ticket items. But then I think COVID really lit it up because everybody's going, oh, this is actually a convenience. I get it. I mean, we saw it in the courtroom when I would walk in and, start explaining payments to the judge, and the judge would be like, I know something about this. I spent 2 years at home having to, looking at my cash sitting on my desk. Right. So, and judges obviously have tons of cash just lying around. So, but it really started taking off. My impression based on what Visa's doing is they're trying to kill it. They want to hide their fees. They want to keep it high. And the Visa guy said it in a room of 600 ISO agents, all with pitchforks in their hand. And he's going, we want to avoid regulation. And the ISOs are going, we would actually love regulation. Give us the guidelines on where to operate so we know what to do and we're not getting fined and we're not having to, change our business model every 4 months. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, we're in legal, so we love regulation. We like deregulation too, but when there's regulation, I can really advise my clients, for a while here on the cash discounting. I'm going, somewhere in here, I understand you can't be the gas station with the lights, but, try this. Maybe it'll work.
All right. I mean, I think it's interesting to define the regulation, right? As far as, it would be, what Visa has tried to do basically is to say there's compliant surcharging, there's true cash discounting, and then everything else is off limits. And so we're not going to say anything about it other than it's off limits.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest mistake, right? Because the truth of the matter is, as far as physical location merchants go, I would say at least 80 to 90% of the ones who have some kind of what I call differential pricing, right? Different price points for different payment methods, they are not doing compliant surcharging and they are not doing true cash discounting. So the question is what's the objective here? Is Visa saying we are going to get all of those merchants to stop doing this? No, you're not. Like, that's not going to happen. We're going to get all the ISOs and agents to stop selling it. No, you're not. So I think what would be good is, why don't we actually make some common sense rules for that? You know what I mean? And actually have some clarity there, because right now none of that exists. Now, as far as Visa not wanting regulation, I don't really want regulation per se, because regulation can be a slippery slope. Look at the mortgage industry and things of that nature, where if the federal government starts to regulate interchange, which would be the natural next step and what Visa is most concerned about, well, what else are they going to regulate? Are they going to regulate how we can price a merchant? We've seen that in other countries as well. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I do think that regulation can be a slippery slope, but it would be great to have some clarity. And the other thing that'd be interesting is, again, I've said this so many times, and I know you guys are always working on these things too. It's like, if these issues ever actually went to court, I don't think we would have a big problem, because Visa would lose. The courts would, unless something drastic has changed, and what I've seen, especially the Supreme Court, I can't imagine that anything has changed here, is that there's definitely this idea of protecting the free speech right of the merchant, and this common sense approach to say, if we're letting the merchant offer a cash discount, there has to be some clarity for sure of, like, there has to be clear posted signs, but as long as there's a clarity and there's not a deception going on, who, Visa's a private company. You're not allowed to tell people how they can price their products. So that's been at least the spirit of and I'm not an attorney, but that's the spirit of the things I've read from majority opinions going back to Expressions Hair Design, et cetera. And so I don't really see that changing at this point.
Well, you heard it here first. I'll quote James that Visa will lose. So we're excited about that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, you said that you're worried about regulation, but you started this podcast saying that, with the advent of the TCPA, your business started booming. So come on, which is it?
Well, yeah, you got to remember though, back then my only business was the consulting side. Now I actually own the ISVs, and we're building out integrated payments and doing all these other things. So I have other interests now, right? So I have to, my interests have shifted a little bit.
Yeah, I think you've leveled up.
Yeah, right.
Now you've switched sides on the table. Could go all day on cash discounting, but the one thing that you touched on is the Credit Card Competition Act, and you saying it's a horrible piece of legislation. I think we all agree, because I think we can all agree that Durbin was really bad too. It was a great idea. We needed something. When we bring people in and we're, training or I'm arguing in court or doing something, and I'll go, this industry is entirely regulated. All we have is this.
Right.
One piece of legislation. Otherwise, it's Visa and MasterCard largely putting out the rules, changing them whenever, and enforcing them how they see fit, and mostly not enforcing them. But what's going on? Why are these pieces of legislation missing the mark so hard? I mean, what's your thought on that?
The answer to that question is I don't know. I have my theories, of course, but I would love to have been in the room when they were discussed, because I can't imagine that anyone who understood payments was in the room when they were discussed.
Yes.
Or even anyone that understands just even basic technical concepts of networking, et cetera. So the idea that we have point-to-point encryption where a transaction starts on one end, goes somewhere else, and comes back, and we are going to federally regulate that this will now have to go to multiple networks. What does that even mean from a security perspective? It's an absolute nightmare. And so this is where I'm like 1,000% on Visa's side, in that if you look at Visa and MasterCard, what have they done well? Well, I do not remember the last time that they had a significant outage where my card didn't work, right? That's pretty crazy. Like, that's incredible when you think about the volume of transactions. So I think from a perspective of a security, a dependability, and uptime, they have done an unbelievably good job at this. And the idea of they need more competition, really? I mean, we got crypto, Venmo, Cash App, like DoorDash, Uber Eats. Do we really, they need more? I don't know. I just feel like this is dangerous to say we're going to enforce innovation and we're going to regulate and mandate that there must be innovation, and we're going to break up the way that Visa has done things and MasterCard have done things forever from a technical side. I'm just totally against that. I think it's ridiculous. I think the notion is ridiculous. Look at the Durbin Amendment and the Durbin, the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act and the Durbin Amendment. I mean, they're still today trying to figure out what it means to with debit. I mean, literally, this is like over a decade, and they're still like, we don't know what they mean, and then they'll sue and say, we don't want to do this. And then finally it's like, you have to do it. And Visa's like, what do we have to do? Well, you have to reroute debit. What does that mean? It's insane. And so the idea that we're going to disrupt embedded, secure point-to-point encrypted technology, and somehow we're going to have a third party that nobody knows about is going to come in here and steal part of the transaction. This is insane. I mean, this is totally going the wrong direction with it. And I feel like best case scenario is what? They're successful at slightly lowering the dues and assessments that the card brands charge for this third party. Who cares? I'm definitely not a fan at all of that one.
Right. And I mean, I think you hit the point. Is there's nobody in the room, because, Visa's argument, it is a valid one that a majority of the interchange goes to the issuing bank. But we all know that, Congress isn't going to touch their beloved banks, because if they did, the whole, system topples over on itself. So I agree that it's misguided, but I would like to see some competition out there, but it completely misses the mark. I have to assume that Senator Durbin understands payments. I wonder if he could draw, the chart that you and I draw of how everything works.
Yeah.
I would say maybe not.
Maybe not. I don't know, but I think either way, it strikes me as more of a political. Some bills I look at and I'm like, okay, I agree or I disagree, but there was an intention to really accomplish something. With Durbin, a lot of stuff he does in the payments arena, I kind of feel like he seems like he has it out for the card brands and maybe disproportionately. Yeah. And he's just kind of making this like almost hateful legislation against them. And I don't know. It seems almost inappropriate to me a little bit of, I don't understand like why is this is just, you woke up one day and decided there's a couple companies out there and I want to disrupt them. Okay. Why? I don't really get it. I mean, and again, the idea that they need more competition, it's like, yes, they've cornered this market, but I mean, the idea that they don't have competition, I mean, there's so much external competition and innovation going on in the payments industry that, they're acquiring companies as fast as they can to stop the external competition. So I would look at it more as an antitrust type of situation, or, hey, there's collusion happening between Visa and MasterCard and the issuing banks. Those are viable arguments that the government could make and that they could take action on. But the idea of somehow inserting a new competitor that's going to have, like, literally we're going to give them access to secure transaction data. This is insane. I don't even know what they're talking about. When I read the legislation the first time, I'm like, I'm a payments expert. I have my lead developer, who's also a payments expert and an amazing developer, read it. And both of us were like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I can't even imagine what they mean. Like what? So I don't know. It's like I said, it's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever read.
Well, I mean, I don't think it will go anywhere because I think the track record, Durbin's intent completely backfired. I personally, when I hear, challenge Visa and MasterCard, I think my Vermonter comes out where I'm like, yeah, fight the power, fight back.
Right.
Take it down. But, to your point, we can complain about Visa and MasterCard all day. But, one of the reasons I love payments and I try and get people, around me excited about it, what I do for a living is it's amazing what we can do. I'm walking up to a register and just tapping this phone and saying, see you later. I'm almost positive in the next year or two, if you're, still driving a gas car, you don't have to get out of your car to pay. I mean, I guess you'll still have to put the gas pump in, maybe. But I think Mercedes came out. They're saying, contactless payment, you're going to drive up to the pump and it's going to be ready to go. And you're not going to have to say no to, punching in your Ralph's card and car wash and all.
Yep.
No. If it sold Skittles out of there, we'd say yes. Absolutely. Give me that option. But I'd have to dual price it there too. So
right. Now they're coming out. I mean, all the car companies. I talked to a guy that only does payments with car companies, and that's his specialty consulting side. And I mean, they have a lot of stuff going on. I mean, they want you to be able to pull up to Starbucks and already have your order from your car ready for pickup. When you pull up to the window, the payment happens and they hand you your Starbucks coffee, So there's a lot going on there on the payment side for sure.
Well, we unfortunately or fortunately last, we could just go for hours probably on, probably any topic in the payments. Yeah. But what do you see as the payments industry, like greatest opportunity for payments? And, I know your audience and your podcast is ISOs, agents. That's what a lot of our clients are too. But we also have some of the, processors and stuff like that. But what do you see just overall as the payments? What's the greatest opportunity? Yeah. How can I become a multi-billionaire in payments?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what.
I'm switching.
Yeah,
careers.
I'll tell you the bets that I'm making. Right, so where I'm putting my money, I believe that the number one trend of the next 20 years in payments is going to be verticalization, and I think it's still really. People are not paying nearly enough attention to it. And so let me explain what I mean by that. There's several trends that kind of converge on this. So let me use the example of neobanking, right? So we look at banking as a service, right? So most of us are familiar with that. Look at how easy it has become to be a bank, to provide banking services, I should say, right? Think about how easy it's become to integrate payment processing. Think about how easy it's become to integrate access to capital, right? Tons of companies out there. You can just, tap into their API and you can become a reseller of their capital solution and you can put it right into your software. Well, and then you think about all of the vendors out there, right? All the wholesalers and vendors, all of them now have APIs to reorder product. Well, what's happening is we're seeing all of that. There's solutions that can be made for specific business types that simply cannot. Square is never going to compete with me as I go after self-storage property owners. Like one of the ISVs I own, we're building two others, but the main one I own right now that's really operational is we go after self-storage property owners. We have a software with integrated payments, obviously differential pricing. And we go after these people. Well, we have a sitemap. We have integrations with gates, like physical gates that have to lock and unlock at a property location. I don't see Square ever building that. So the idea being these large companies that have this kind of stranglehold on the market, or that seems like they do, unless it's like a Toast where it's like, wow, they're going after restaurants, right? But I think even for them, they run the risk of companies coming along that say, well, wait a minute, we're just for pizza shops. And we actually tie in so that when you start to run low on dough, we're tied into your vendor. So your dough shows up the next, there's like a never ending amount of specialization and customization now that can be done from insurance, payroll, banking services, payment processing, along with all of the different business features, accounting. I think we're going to see QuickBooks, they may win long-term because of their API, but I think their current model will not be the way forward, because if I have to build an accounting software that's just for people who have self-storage properties, my software is going to be much easier to use, much more streamlined, because I don't have to have all the bells and whistles. I just need what people want for that. So the bet that I'm making and what my mission over the next 20 years for my business, obviously I'm always trying to help the payments industry, but as far as where I'm making my money, we're building these software companies where we're identifying a vertical and saying, hey, let's dominate that vertical. And we're looking at verticalization from everywhere from content creation, top of the funnel. That company, for instance, we have a podcast called The Self-Storage Insight. And, that's just for self-storage property owners. We do free ebooks, we do social media posts, all of that, all the way through the sales process, installation, support, payment processing, banking, everything. And so I just feel like that's kind of an unbeatable model over the next 20 years, because no matter what innovations come, no matter what changes happen, and now there's this service and now it's crypto or now it's whatever, I don't care. We're going to find a way to integrate that into our solution specifically for our clients, and they're going to have a really, really hard time leaving us. So I think verticalization, to me, that's where it's at. And it doesn't have to be a necessarily specific business type per se, but just that idea of focus, where I think is really the biggest challenge for the ISO community. Because historically they've always been, we sell a Verifone terminal to everybody, so it's been very kind of, scatter approach. And even the 1099 model is really built on that. There's not much training. There's, because we're not, we're selling simple things. Cash discounting and dual pricing kind of extended that of, hey, just go tell people you're going to wipe out their payment processing. Yeah. But that's not going to be good enough long-term, because you're going to have people like me that are like, yeah, we do dual pricing and we have a specific software just for your business. Right. And so that's where it's at. And that's what I'm seeing playing out. And so that's the big bet that I'm making.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I saw early on some of our clients doing really well because they're going, hey, we'll build you a website. And these mom and pops, loved it.
Yep.
And once they own your website, I host it, I own it, you're canceling. Okay, your website's going down. And then they would, add in, build a Facebook page, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, look, now my niece can see I exist on the internet, and I've got one friend from my niece. I made it. And I saw that do really well, but then I also saw it fall apart because a lot of salespeople are good at one thing, selling. And it doesn't matter what it is as far as maintaining it. And that's where, I encourage ISOs and agents to, partner with people like yourself to do these things for them. I have all the time people going, hey, I want to get a direct agreement with, Fiserv or TSYS or whatever. I'm going, why would you do that? Go to somebody who will do all the back end, and you get a better, you get to just benefit off that. You can just do what you want to do. So, and then put into, all the different hooks that other people have thought up and benefit off of that. So,
well, I'll tell you what, my biggest challenge strategically when I look at, the next 5-10 years for me personally is I think the big winner, you mentioned who's going to, how do you become a multi-billionaire in the industry? Well, I think right now we have these two worlds. We have the ISV world. I'll include the PayFacs in that, but we have these technology companies that are taking advantage of payments. And then we have the legacy ISO agent world, right? And nobody has really figured out how to bring those two worlds together in a really profitable, meaningful way. Maybe it's impossible. I don't know. It's a very, very difficult problem. Every time I try to solve it, I get really frustrated. Like,
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. Like to think about this, James, like, so CC Storage, which is the ISV I was mentioning earlier, right? Self-storage property owners, fully functional. We sell, like lots of property owners a month. All right. I do not even have a reseller program, which is insane. Like I'm connected to every ISO and agent in the industry and I don't let them sell it.
Right.
It's like, that's insane. And the reason is because every time we go to do it, we run into all these weird challenges and frustrations around how do we do compensation? How do we get our fair share of the money? Are we going to sell these people anyway? And so it's like, I'm still committed to solving that problem. And the next ISV I roll out, I'm going to make sure is one that I think has a better crossover, which, you'll see more on that coming probably in 3 or 4 months. But, it's a challenge. It is very, very difficult. But I do think there's a huge opportunity there to bring those worlds together. But it's not easy. It's very challenging.
No, it's not easy. I mean, people have, tried to put together like unions. CoCard kind of did this where you buy in. And I thought it was pretty cool, but it just wasn't that much different. The idea was there of, join our collective bargaining. And that's kind of what already happens when, you all go to, a Priority or, My Camper, what some of the bigger players in the field. And you kind of get that. But I agree, there's still not the ultimate solution of, how do you bring us all together? But
and see that those are based on the value of cost savings.
Right.
But the problem is that model is, if not dead, it's dying quickly. We have to get the value of the actual solution on the plus side, on the revenue side.
Right.
That's where we've struggled. So the industry is I feel like our industry has been very good at cutting cost. Where we're not good is at growing revenue by providing solutions. And we're good at going on the defense, but we're not good at going on the offense. And the problem is that now the offense is so good. I mean, thousands of ISVs out there that are eating up one vertical after another. You've got these huge PayFacs that are grabbing market share. You've got Stripe, you've got Adyen, you've got, these are like legit. I mean, this is major market forces that are just gobbling up the market. And so we've got to go back on the offense, I think, as an ISO community. And I think a lot of these ISOs, I mean, I hate to say it because I know a lot of them are going to say I'm being impractical, but a lot of them, they need to become a technology company. Like they gotta go out and spend the $200,000 a year to hire their first lead developer. I mean, believe me, I feel the pain. I have a bunch of them. I get it, but it's expensive. But at some point, you got to put a stake in the ground and say, okay, like this is what I believe where the market is going. And when I talk to ISO owners, most of them agree with me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Payments Experts Podcast. New episodes, first and third Thursdays. If you're interested in learning more about PEP and how Global Legal Law Firm may be able to assist you, please visit us at globallegallawfirm.com. To schedule a free consultation, give us a call at 888-846-8901 or email us at pep@attorneygl.com. And once again, thank you for listening.
1, 2, 3.